All right. After all that show, we are ready to record. Thank you so much, Carlos, for being here
My pleasure.
with us today. It's very, very exciting to me. As I was telling you a little earlier, you're kind of a celebrity around my household because I have lots of pianist friends who study at MSM and Juilliard, and lots of them have entered the collaborative piano program. So it's actually very exciting to me because we all read your posts, we all wait for them very eagerly, and it's pretty cool. And just to give us some context about who Carlos is, I'm going to pull out the bio I was able to find. Carlos Avila, also known as Mr. Kabila. We'll get into that a little bit later. Hailed for his beautiful command of tone and mood and unruffable savoir-faire, San Francisco Chronicle, his layers of emotional expression, and his level of artistry that seem far beyond his years. Carlos Avila is one of the most in-demand pianists on the classical music scene. His concerts have taken him across North and South America. All right, so there's a lot more information here, but some of the things that are very relevant to us today is that you studied at Juilliard and you also studied at Yale. For what I understand, you studied piano performance at Juilliard, and then you went to do a collaborative piano program at Yale. Is that correct?
No, actually.
All right.
I was at Yale first in a
Oh, okay.
in their School of Music. They have this thing called the Certificate of Performance program. I'm not even sure if it exists anymore. Sort of founded by the late Aldo Periso, and it's for people who don't have a bachelor's degree.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but you enter in a sort of graduate program. So we call it the gift certificate.
The gift certificate.
It means
All
it
right.
doesn't give you anything. And so afterwards, I did both my bachelor's and master's at Juilliard.
Oh, so you started at Yale.
Yeah.
Oh, but I thought that there was some sort of program you did after Juilliard, or was it? Or you started at Yale?
No.
Okay.
And then I started at Yale from '02 to '05, and then I was at Juilliard for 15 years.
For 15 years.
For 15 years.
How old were you when you got into Yale first?
When I got into Yale, I was 20 years old.
20.
And then I
Okay.
entered Juilliard when I was 23.
Oh,
then-
I
yeah.
started my bachelor's at 21. So
Yeah.
we can relate to that. And
Yeah.
just to put the
And-
icing on the cake of your intro, you have on your Facebook, just because you're offended doesn't mean you're right. That's so interesting, and we'll talk about all that good stuff right now.
And just to clarify, I've never actually done a collaborative piano degree. So-
Really?
No.
That's really surprising to me. You have been a very vocal advocate for how collaborative pianists should be addressed and also respected, right? But before we get there, you did a bunch of piano degrees, and I'm very interested in that because you have been well known for being a really, really good pianist, a really, really strong one, like really great fingers and everything. When was the moment you realized that you wanted to devote more time, putting your great piano skills to the service of the music industry?
For me, it was sort of by accident. I think how most people end up with their calling is in the music world is sort of by accident. You always have these plans of what you're going to do in your life, but never really ends up like that.
Exactly.
And I had just finished my master's degree at Juilliard, and when I was at Juilliard, all my roommates were cellists.
All
actually.
cellists,
Yeah,
okay.
they were all cellists.
Yeah.
And they're still some of my great friends today. I finished my master's degree in 2010.
Yeah.
And I had no idea what to do with my life.
Exactly.
I was doing competitions around, but without that much success. And I ended up going on a tour with a singer in 2010, and it was a gigantic tour. It was a 39-city tour across the United States.
Oh my God. Yeah.
And it sort of gave me money in my pocket to at least not have to worry about rent for a while. It was about 2 months long, and then I came back, and I still really didn't know what to do.
Yeah.
And I was working at Juilliard, on staff,
Yeah.
and it was sort of by accident. There was a makeup jury at Juilliard that had to be done in the fall, and so I played for a makeup jury. And in the elevator later that day, I met Joel Krosnick, and
Yeah.
Joel Krosnick, he asked me. He said, "Hey, are you looking for a job?"
He elevator pitched you.
Yes.
Okay. Joel Krosnick is a big time cello faculty at Juilliard.
Yeah, he said, "Are you looking for a job?" And it was sort of by luck. I said, "In fact, I am. I'm looking for any work at all."
Yeah.
And he said, "Well, if you're willing to learn a bulk of the cello repertoire, then you have a job." And before I knew it, I was his studio pianist.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, Joel Krosnick is a really respected teacher, and he has really great students.
Yes.
And you're well known also because you have the Rachmaninoff cello sonata in your repertoire.
Yeah, it was one of the only pieces I knew coming into that job.
Oh, you knew it already?
Yeah, I knew it already
crazy.
back then. It was one of the only ones that I knew. And so I put myself to the task of learning the cello repertoire, and really just the cello repertoire, not really anything else, just that, because it was like a day job. I mean, I had to go into that studio Monday through Friday. As long as the Juilliard String Quartet was in town, then I had to be there for his entire studio, and it's a job I kept for 9 years. So,
9 years, yeah.
Yeah, and Joel Krosnick. I credit him with really giving me my first job and sort of accidentally introducing me into the collaborative world.
Yes.
Because although I'd played with my friends and my roommates, while I was a student, I wasn't really working for real as a professional until I met Mr. Krosnick.
Was there any difference between working as a student, playing with your friends, and working as a professional?
Yeah, I mean, when I was working as a student, although I was getting paid by the school and not much, as most people know.
Right? Yeah.
But when I was working as a student, it was mainly just for my friends. I think that's how a lot of pianists get into this into this world, is they have friends that are string players, and then that one thing leads to another, and suddenly they're playing with a lot more people.
Yeah, that's how it works, and I actually really commend all collaborative pianists, because you're one of the few one of us that actually does what they studied for a living.
Yeah.
Because most, if you don't end up going to the Met or New York Phil or become a big soloist, most of us end up getting some day job or something to support our career, but you actually play all the time, right?
Yeah, that was my day job.
Exactly. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, like I was doing a lot of other things, in my career at the time. But when it came to Monday through Friday, work days, work hours of the work days, what I was doing was playing for cellists.
Amazing.
Yes, I mean, Mr. Krosnick's entire studio, but also other studios at Juilliard.
Exactly.
And so that's how I sort of got into and then the world expanded from there. But that's definitely how I got into the collaborative world.
Exactly.
It never even occurred to me, actually, before meeting Mr. Krosnick, that would be my calling. Wow. I think it was once that door was open, I saw a bunch of things.
A bunch of things.
Yeah, a bunch of things that opened my eyes really quickly. One was how shitty we were being paid across America.
Everywhere.
Yes, just everywhere. That was one of the eye-opening things, and it was this issue that everyone recognized, and it's like nobody could do anything about it. Nobody would really say anything about it. Mr. Krosnick was always regretful, and he's always saying, I wish you got paid more.
So being a collaborative pianist means that you have to know a lot of repertoire. How many hours does that take for you to learn all that music? I'm sure that lots and lots, right?
Yeah, I mean, for context, I mean, I was much younger back then, but the Rachmaninoff cello sonata took me 6 months to learn.
Yes. And how,
of daily practice and grinding.
Exactly. How much were you paid the first time you played it?
Oh, I don't, $100 or something.
Can you imagine that? What job pays you $100 for, let's say, 200 hours of practice, right?
Yeah.
Or of work.
Yeah, it was ridiculous.
Yeah, it's a really ridiculous thing, but I just feel that it's one of those professions where, since we're musicians, we're artists, and we really love what we're doing, a lot of people don't think about just paying us fair because we are supposed to want to do it for free, right?
Yeah, it's also a relatively new profession. I mean, yes, the collaborative piano profession in itself didn't really exist. Even the term collaborative piano didn't really exist until the last, I don't know, maybe 20 or 30 years. I think a lot of that started, at least I can't speak for other countries, but at least in America and on the East Coast, and specifically in New York, a lot of it started at Juilliard with a man named Sam Sanders, who I never got to meet. He died young, and he had a condition, but he's a legend in the Juilliard world.
Yes.
He basically founded the collaborative piano department.
Wow, and that's only 20, 30 years ago.
Yeah, and like I said, I'm talking about a man I never met. But,
yes.
but he was very close with Mr. Krosnick, and Mr. Krosnick would always talk about him.
Exactly.
He played with, all the greats. Like he played with Rostropovich and everybody around New York City.
Yeah, and it's interesting to me to think that the collaborative program is so new, given that it's something that everyone needs from the beginning of time. Ever since we've been playing concert music, there's been a need for collaborative pianos. It's like that meme I saw about the can being invented in a year and the can opener being invented like 20 years after.
Yeah, exactly.
It's kind of like that, right?
That's a good analogy. Yeah, and then I met a lot more influential people in the field when I started really working around the tri-state area. One of them was Rohan De Silva. And
Who's he?
Rohan De Silva, also a legend in our field, still at Juilliard right now.
Okay.
He, along with Sam Sanders, sort of paved the way for the collaborative piano world. Now is very known in an inextricable way to Itzhak Perlman. So Rohan De Silva and Itzhak Perlman have been a duo for, I think, 25, almost 30 years now.
Pretty awesome.
Yes, and before Rohan, I believe that Mr. Perlman was playing with Sam Sanders.
Okay.
So Rohan was definitely a mentor to me as well, because he was doing exactly what I was doing, but he's flying around in private jets with Mr. Perlman.
Really? Okay.
He's a very glamorous life, and
best case scenario. Right?
Yeah, and he is the best in the business still currently today. I mean, he's somebody we all look up to. That's amazing. We look at Rohan's life and we're like, wow, he's got it good.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought up the whole glamour part of things, because again, putting us into context, most pianists who start going to Juilliard, when they first come in, or like any big school, they think that they've already made it. They think they're these big artists and everything. And then after you go out of school, you're hit with this this horrible reality that not all of us can do this for a living. Not all of us can be Lang Lang. A lot of us have to kind of pivot into somewhere else into our careers. But the case of collaborative pianos is really interesting, because you go from being a soloist who everyone looks up to if you're really good, for example, to being to this role kind of as a musical servant, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of people complain that you're treated that way.
Yeah.
So I would like to hear a little bit about how that experience was for you to go from being a solo piano to being treated poorly the first time as being a solo piano.
I never really realized the big divide between solo piano and collaborative piano until I joined the world of collaborative piano.
Exactly.
And since I never did a degree in collaborative piano, and I never really had anything to do with the collaborative piano department at Juilliard, there really was a sharp divide. It's like there are people that are quote unquote trained for collaborative piano, and suddenly it was a specialty. It was a specialty thing, which I never learned. That's in my view, piano is piano. Whether you're playing a Rachmaninoff piano concerto or you're playing the Rachmaninoff cello sonata, it's still really just music. I mean, composers, as you know, they don't write for cello and collaborative piano, right?
Cello and piano.
Yes.
And you hilariously pointed out that some of Bach pieces actually say piano sonata with accompaniment by cello.
Yeah.
Right?
Beethoven's original French publications say that they say for piano and cello obbligato accompagnamento.
That's really talking about Beethoven. That's really appropriate. Yeah. He's one of those composers that writes really hard for the piano, and the other instruments. Of course, it's hard as well, but you just can't compare it. There's so many notes.
Which is when I started. Which I guess now that I'm kind of notorious for it, I bother everyone on Facebook about.
And we love it. We love you for it.
It led me down this rabbit hole of the term accompanist.
All right, let's get into that.
Yeah, which so many people use sort of without any discretion at all. I think a lot of people don't know what it means, and I think a lot of people misuse the term. And I think also that there is a big contingent of even pianists who don't mind the term, and there's a big contingent of pianists who absolutely despise it, of which I'm in the latter.
Absolutely. Did you start off minding it?
In the beginning, it was just sort of a thing. When people would call me an accompanist, I'd be like, okay, that's not my identity. it's like the difference between calling you accompanist in a situational setting and calling you an accompanist as like a life identity. It's weird. It was my teacher, Mr. Lowenthal. He used to say, once you admit that you're a specialist in one thing, you're essentially admitting that you're bad at everything else.
Oh man, that's intense.
Which, you know, is really not the case
No.
for so many people. And then it was one real turning point where I really came to despise the word more than anything else. I remember it very clearly. In 2013, this is maybe 3 years into working for Mr. Krosnick,
Yeah.
a friend of mine who is in the studio, very talented cellist. His name is Tavi Ungerlieder. And actually now he's a associate or assistant principal cello of Montreal Symphony. But
Cool.
at the time he was a student, and he offered me this sort of, now that I look back to it, kind of hilarious opportunity. He said he was going to do this competition. It was one of these small competitions in a small state, but it had a $15,000 first prize.
$15,000.
Yeah, and he said, I'll make a deal with you.
All right.
He said, I'm going to play things like among many other sonatas, I'm playing Rachmaninoff cello sonatas and Beethoven Shostakovich sonatas. He said, I'll make a deal with you. If I win first prize, I'll split it with you 50-50. And if I don't win anything, you get nothing too. And I thought about it and I was like,
It's pretty intense.
I thought about it and I was like, he's going to win. I knew it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I took the deal and he won.
He won. Well, how would you have felt if he hadn't won?
It was a deal, and we were among friends, you know. So it wasn't, And he's still a friend today, but the crux of this story is afterwards it led to a tour in Arkansas. We had a 7-city tour in Arkansas. I remember very clearly.
Yeah.
And through each one of the recitals that we were playing, which included. The program was Beethoven Cello Sonata No. 4, Shostakovich Cello Sonata, and Rachmaninoff Cello Sonata. Pretty much a bear of a program for piano. You know,
Really huge. Yeah.
One would argue more for piano than for cello. And at every city that we were playing at, we would receive a check from the recital presenter separately. So the recital presenter would give Tavi a check, and then the recital presenter would give me a check separately. And sort of en route to the next concert, we were talking. We didn't discuss anything, and we realized that he was getting paid 75%, and I was getting paid 25% of this fee. So you know. And he looked at the discrepancy in our fees, and Tavi was like, "That's fucking unacceptable." I mean, he knew exactly what the role of the piano was. He was very sensitive to that, and so he would. After every recital, he would pay me the difference. I didn't ask for it or anything. Just out of the goodness of his heart, he's like, "This is." He said, "This is fucked up. We're going to do this 50-50."
Yeah.
And then at one of the dinners after the recital program, we had a chance to. Confront is the wrong word, but we had a chance to sort of talk to the presenter, and we sort of confronted them about this discrepancy in the fee,
Right.
and they said, why does the pianist get so much less money? And I remember very clearly the woman, who's a very nice lady, nobody means any harm when they say these things. And she said, well, because in the Rachmaninoff Cello Sonata, specifically that piece, she said, there's an accompanist. And I said, well, I noticed that the following group playing after us is a flute and guitar duo. And they admitted that they were paying them 50-50 to a flute and guitar duo. And I said, why do you pay them 50-50 for a flute and guitar duo? And she said the same thing. She said, because in a flute and guitar duo, there's no accompanist. And that's when I started to realize, I was like, when people say it's just words, they say they're just words, you shouldn't get offended by them. I have encountered this in my career so much. They say, Carlos, why does it bother you so much? They're just words. You can toss them off. And it's true, they are words. But when words start to affect how much people are paying you, then those aren't words anymore, right? I mean,
It's a concept.
Yeah, it's the fact that she believes that in a flute and guitar duo, that was 50-50.
Because it says duo instead
Yes,
of...
but in a Rachmaninoff Cello Sonata, that was 75-25 to her. like boggled my mind. And that's when I realized, I was like, this word has got to go.
All right.
This word's really got to go. I mean, it's affecting how people, not just how people look at us, but how people pay us.
Yeah,
too.
how you're perceived and how you are. So sometimes there's a lot of pianists who get left out of programs.
Yeah,
or
completely. No pictures, no
billing at
like
all.
no billing at all. Yeah, and it was as the years went by, it sort of just boggled my mind more and more.
And how did you handle? How did other pianists, collaborative pianists around you, handle that
Well, the thing is, at the time,
at the time? Yeah.
Actually still at Juilliard, the word accompanist is still at Juilliard.
I just got an email from them
Yeah.
like, oh, we were holding accompanist auditions.
It's terrible. In many other schools, that word doesn't exist. It's forbidden. But Juilliard is still living in the 1950s in some way or another. And, the whole term accompanist there, some people are okay with it. And that's their right, that's totally fine if they're okay with it. A lot of people think it's about ego, and I can't stress enough that it's really not about ego at all. It's not. It's like, well, if you want your picture to be there or your name to be in the same size font as the cellist, that must be somewhat rooted in ego, and I don't think this at all. I think it's a matter of just fundamental and basic common sense and human rights,
Yeah, and I think
human rights, that's the wrong term, but
Yeah.
but you know what I mean. It's like, why shit on your pianist who has so much to do and has so much work to do and puts in so much, so much of the work.
Yeah, I think it should be written into the Constitution that everyone has a right to have an ego as well.
Yeah.
And there's no reason to step on it.
Yeah,
So
I was reminded of this a few years ago. I was on Instagram and I was looking at these people who climb Mount Everest. And these people who climb Mount Everest, a lot of them are very wealthy and don't have much, experience in climbing. And so they have to get these Sherpas to bring them to the top of the mountain.
Someone who helps them out.
Right.
Yeah.
But when they get to the top, right, they always take these selfies. They always take these like promotional pictures, and they said, "I made it here by myself."
Yeah, exactly.
When the truth is, I mean, they really did. Like the Sherpas did 90% of the work, right? I mean, they were born and raised on this mountain. They brought them up there. They held their hand. They got them out of every dangerous situation.
And that's
they
exactly
got
what
them
you
up
guys
there.
do.
Yeah, and they're like, and at the end, they're nameless recognition. We don't even know who they are. When it eventually comes to the top of the mountain, you just see this white guy, right?
That's
it's always a white guy.
It's always
and,
white, yeah.
and you always see him at the top, and he's like, made it here by myself.
Damn. And that's a really good analogy because there's sometimes some violin students or cello students, they have no experience playing with other people, right?
Yeah.
And they are not very used to like giving cues because I've been to some Juilliard concerts and from other schools, and sometimes the soloist is a young kid, and he does no cues at all to some of the pianists, and somehow they catch them.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that is like really advanced musicality.
Yeah.
And have you had any experiences when playing with younger students where you really think you've saved them completely?
Oh yeah, I mean, in my opinion, age has nothing to do with it.
Oh, okay.
I mean,
Okay.
Some of the most talented and educated, respectful, sensitive people I've met have been teenagers.
Really?
I mean,
Yeah.
I remember meeting Vladimir Fung for
Vladimir.
the first time.
Vladimir.
I met him when he was 15 years old, and he was a 40-year-old man inside a 15-year-old body. I mean, there was nothing.
Yeah.
There was nothing you could tell this kid that he didn't already know, and he was already so sensitive to. I mean, everybody now he's a celebrity, right? Now he's like
great.
this
He's amazing.
global rock star. But when he was 15 years old, a lot of people don't remember this kid who. It was just kind of this genius
Just
kid.
this kid, yeah.
And I remember we went on tour together twice, actually, with the Heifetz Institute. And I remember thinking, I've never met anyone that was so sensitive to the role of the piano
Really?
as Vladimir. And he's 15. I mean, I work with DMA students and professionals who
don't have that.
really don't give a shit at all. And here's this 15-year-old kid who just knows it all.
Yeah.
You know?
And I saw that you
know.
wrote a really beautiful letter of recommendation to him.
I did, yes, actually, yeah. When it was for the Kovner
Oh,
Fellowship, yeah.
okay.
It was for the Kovner Fellowship when he auditioned for his bachelor's degree. I wrote it to Ara Gusalimian.
Yeah.
It was sort of out of my, like, I don't really do that.
Absolutely, but still, the gesture is very nice.
Yeah, his teacher actually encouraged me to write the letter.
Oh,
He said, you know, it would mean a lot coming from you because you don't do that. You know, you don't really do that. So
Okay.
yeah.
Well, he more than deserves it. We all love Sladomir here, and I've actually worked with him, and I agree
Right,
that
I think I know that. Yeah.
Yeah, I wrote a cello concerto for him, and we recorded it. And I can attest to the fact that he's a 40-year-old man in a 20-something-year-old body. So
Yeah.
he's a really cool guy. And now talking about writing stuff, you have been also very notorious for sending very intense emails about the whole accompanist thing, about the whole payment thing. How has that experience? How has the experience affected either your career? How has it changed things for you?
I'm probably the wrong person to ask because I'm sure, you know, since you know that I'm very vocal on Facebook and also very vocal when I feel like something wrong has been done in the music world. And I'm quite positive that it has affected my own career. There will always be, there are people out there who I'm sure are being like, oh, well, Carlos is such a pain in the ass. You know, he's bitching about everything and whatever. Some people see that and some people think that I'm just whatever, fighting for what's right. Honestly, I have a temper, and I when something's wrong like that, I don't really think about it more than this can't be right.
Yes.
You know, and yes, it's gotten me into trouble quite a bit.
But it's a good kind of trouble, like, you know, that people are seeing this, and it's also very good that you're making it so public, so other people feel a little safer speaking out. Because I'm sure that there's lots of pianists before you who have felt the same way.
Yeah.
But everyone is just scared of the big man.
Well,
or whatever.
especially when it comes to the transparency in payment.
Yeah.
I think that a lot of people are just, they don't want to put numbers out there, especially in public, which is sort of a faux pas, right? You don't tell people how much you make, and you don't sort of discuss money, and especially not in public, right? That's like a thing, not just in the music world, but all around in every profession. It's sort of something you don't
in the U.S.
mention. Yeah, in the U.S.
That's how they get you, but not having you not discuss your salary.
Yeah, but then how is anything ever gonna fucking change? Right?
Yeah, and nobody says anything, and nobody knows.
Yeah,
knowledge
and
is power.
I think for a long time that people just had no idea that staff pianists at Juilliard were getting paid around $20 an hour for decades.
$20
an hour for decades.
Like McDonald's workers.
Yes.
Basically.
At Manus, they're still getting paid $20 an hour.
Really?
Juilliard has since changed in the last
like
few
30
years.
Something I've seen.
Something like that, maybe higher. I believe it's 40 now. But a lot of that has been because of transparency. You know, like if you plug in the number $20 an hour, if you plug that into an inflation calculator from 1990, because in 1990, I mean, they were getting paid the same amount.
Yeah. You
just plug that just to accommodate inflation, you'll get a number almost 3 times as much.
Yeah.
But the payment has stayed the same. And I remember bringing that up once to my supervisor at Juilliard, and she said, well, that's the way it's always been. And I just remember thinking, I'm like, that's the way it's always been is actually an argument for the other side. Like
that's why it should change.
That's why it should change. I mean, nothing. You know what costs the same as it does in 1990? Nothing.
Yeah. What is $20? Like.
Yeah.
Yeah. You can have a good meal for $20.
Yeah.
What do you think? Ideally, what would your ideal rate be?
I don't know. Because I won't divulge like all my numbers on this podcast, but I do charge more than anybody I know in New York City.
Really?
I do it for a reason, and I don't believe anybody has a higher hourly rate than I do, to my knowledge. And that's okay with me. I think it does a number of things for me, which is weed out people I don't want to work with.
Exactly.
And it just, I think that in some way it encourages other pianists in my profession. We're all open with our numbers to really just raise these rates. I mean, the time for change is now.
Exactly. But there you're talking about what you charge personally, right? What do you think would be a good rate to be paid as part of an institution, as being part of the staff?
I don't know. I mean, a lot higher.
A lot higher. Yeah.
I think, if you're playing something like the Rachmaninoff Cello Sonata, you need to be paid $100 an hour.
Can you imagine if you were paid more if the music was harder?
I know that would be crazy.
That would be so hard to Can you imagine Rachmaninoff? Okay, but if you're just playing Mozart, no, you're gonna get paid a lot less.
Right.
That'd be pretty ridiculous. But in an ideal world. And now getting to some of your relationships with students and people who contacted you. Famously you're also known as Mr. Kabila. How has that been? How have you dealt with emails and unrespectful students and all that throughout the years?
Yeah. So with that, I mean, I've calmed down a little bit.
You calmed down a bit? Okay.
Yeah.
Did you start hard?
Just to quote one of my professors from Juilliard, he said, Carlos, you have to have a little empathy. I now think about where students are coming from, especially that I worked at Juilliard for so long, and so it's all I knew.
Yep.
I was really Juilliard born and raised.
Yes. And
let's be real, the majority of string players and pianists from Juilliard, they have been doing this for so long. They know the deal. A lot of them went to pre-college at Juilliard. A lot of them, they've known everything since they were 7 years old. They've had parents bringing them to their lessons, and they've had, But now that I work for a lot of other schools, and now I even work for a state school, so people come from so many different backgrounds.
Exactly.
They come from so many different backgrounds, and I have a lot of sympathy for people who didn't grow up like me. Sometimes I have to check my own privilege. I grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area. Not that kind of privilege. I mean, I'm a single child, single mother. Not that kind of privilege, but the privilege in that, educationally speaking, growing up in the San Francisco Bay Area meant that I was educated about musical etiquette from the time I was 7 years old.
That's pretty awesome. That's pretty advanced.
And so were all my friends.
Yeah.
We all were playing chamber music and doing youth orchestra and just like these Juilliard pre-college kids. They, you see them. They know what's been going on since they were 6, 7 years old.
And they play a high level.
But not a lot of people come from that background.
Interesting.
And that's why I always have to be very, if somebody does use the word accompanist with me, it's not there. No one's doing it. No one's doing it to offend me. It's just
they're not educated in that part.
Yeah, I think and that's fine, and that's okay. Like I said, no one's doing it on purpose.
Yeah, it's pretty cool that you talk about empathy and thinking about how other people are raised. But these things, they take time to settle, because I think I've never met anyone as vocal as you about this whole thing, and I think that in the future, I think it's definitely going to get a lot better.
I hope so.
Yeah, but
it's already getting better.
Yeah, you think so? What?
Well, I mean, Juilliard has doubled their rates in just the last 3 or 4 years.
Just in the last 3 or 4 years.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm sure it's very much thanks to you and other people who have.
I can't take credit because I haven't worked there in the last 3 or 4 years, but I can say knowing
just when you got out.
But knowing the entire staff, I still know the entire staff there. I still talk to them every day, and I can't say what happened behind the scenes of how they doubled their rates, but I will say that it was just a lot of people who had to open their eyes.
That's good. That's really good.
And I'm glad they did it. Manus, you should probably also think about doing that too.
Yeah.
And also MSM, because Manus and MSM are still light years behind too.
Yeah. You've talked about another school that pays you guys really well. Where?
Yeah, NYU and Rutgers.
Okay,
so yeah. Every school has different budgets for these kinds of things, and
I'm surprised Juilliard doesn't. Well, Juilliard did, but I wouldn't think that Rutgers and NYU would have that.
Neither did I. Yeah. Neither. I didn't think so either. I mean, you can't underestimate a state school, and NYU, of course, is still a very wealthy school. They don't have a gigantic music department, obviously, and they're not
Exactly.
well known for their music department. But just the fact that they're paying almost 3 times the amount as
Really? Is it that much?
as
Wow.
almost 3 times the amount as MSM or Manus is, saying something that the pay scale can be so vastly different
Yeah.
between two schools that are 5-minute walk away from each other.
Exactly. and Manus and MSM are supposed to be one of the
Leading institutions,
Exactly. So now I would like to get into your development as a pianist,
Yeah,
because
sure.
you are a really, really high performing pianist. You play really, really hard music at a really, really fast pace. So how does that begin? And first of all, your name is Carlos Avila,
Yes.
and I always thought you were like Latino or Mexican, because we're all like Latino and Mexicans in my friend group, and I was very surprised to find out you're Filipino, right?
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about where your family comes from and all that, if you can.
Well, most Filipinos, well, I wouldn't say most, but a large majority of us have Hispanic names. I think the rule for Asians is if he looks Asian with a Spanish name, 100% he's Filipino.
Of course.
But yeah, I think both of us are in a demographic that is not entirely represented at any conservatory, at least in New York.
Yes.
So for the time I was at Juilliard, I was the only Filipino pianist in the 15 years that I was there. So
Absolutely. Wow.
I don't know if there are any out there now, but
I haven't met any.
yeah.
I haven't met any. But so your family moved from Philippines to San
Yes.
Francisco?
Yeah, my mom. Hmm.
Or your mom?
Yeah, and I was raised by my mom in the San Francisco Bay Area.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Do the Philippines have like a strong musical culture or something, or how did that come into your life?
I mean, when it comes to classical music, not really. So
How'd you find it?
for me, it was just my mom who just started me on piano when she was a nursing student.
She's a nurse.
Yeah. But Filipinos, we don't have the same kind of cultural awareness of the classical music world that
Exactly.
the Chinese and the Koreans do.
They're
Right?
really strong right now, right?
Yeah. Oh, I mean, the Koreans are taking over the whole world. Right?
Yeah. Everyone is sending these Korean, all the big posts, but
Yeah.
no Filipinos.
No Filipinos.
And there's also not a lot of Mexicans. Right?
Yes, of
so
course.
that is something that I can totally relate to.
Yeah.
The fact that we come to the U.S. and we have the privilege of going to a big institution like Juilliard.
Yeah.
I personally have never felt like any racism or discrimination, thankfully. How did you feel like when you first came to Juilliard? Was there ever any awareness that you were Filipino and that you were different from the other kids?
In that regard, I really have to say that Juilliard is an incredibly loving institution. At least in my, maybe many people might have different stories. Some people hate their time at Juilliard, right? I would never say I hated my time at Juilliard, and I don't know how it is for you, but that's where I met all my lifelong friends.
Yeah.
And that's where I met everybody that really mattered to me at the end. I don't have all good memories from Juilliard, of course, but the culture when it comes to like you said, like racism or anything, I really never felt any of that there.
Thankfully. Yeah.
I only felt positivity from the community.
That's awesome.
To quote Mr. Lowenthal again, a lot of people, they say, "Oh, but Juilliard is so competitive." You hear that all the time. My teacher would always say, whenever somebody tells me that Juilliard is so competitive, I feel like what they're trying to tell me is I'm so competitive.
Yeah, you just talk about yourself. Yeah, exactly.
But in that regard,
It doesn't feel like it. I've never felt
Yeah.
any of that toxic competitiveness, or however you say it. Like I've heard some stories about people putting like little knives in pianos.
yeah, I heard those stories too. I never.
It's just a
yeah.
myth, isn't it? Like I've never heard any about that.
Yeah, and a lot of my good friends are pianists, so we were always sort of there for each other
Exactly.
all the time. Yeah.
And in terms of your piano chops, how did you develop that? Because how old were you when you started?
When I started, I was 6 years old. I think.
A little late-ish, or
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, 6 is late if you compare to kids these days. I mean, I don't have any like massively different story from the rest of the people of how I groomed my piano technique. But
Yeah.
but I will say that being at Juilliard as a pianist and not in the collaborative piano program, I wouldn't do it any differently. And that's not to denigrate the collaborative piano program, of which I have a massive amount of respect for. And I've never had anything to do with the program, but of course I have lots of friends who have gone through that program, and what they do is great.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I would also say that if there's one thing missing from the world of the collaborative piano expertise, it's that a lot of people lose the focus on what it means to just be a good pianist.
All right.
You know, in general. It's like, if you're playing something like the Strauss Violin Sonata or the Rachmaninoff Cello Sonata, I use the Rachmaninoff Cello Sonata as an example so much because if you ask any pianist, they will say that the difficulty of that cello sonata far exceeds the difficulty of the second piano concerto.
Really?
Which is wild, right?
Just
like
wild,
a lot of instrumentalists could never even put that into their head that a piece of chamber music surpasses the difficulty of one of our most famous concertos. And so a lot of people used to ask me when I couldn't do a concert of the Rachmaninoff Cello Sonata, they say, well, who should I ask? Should I ask like somebody with, you know, many, many decades of expertise in collaborative piano? Or should I ask a pianist who doesn't know it to just learn it? You know? And honestly, sometimes asking a pianist to just learn it is sometimes the way to go.
Really? Because they have no idea.
They have no idea. That's how I got my start.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
you just learned it because, oh, okay, hey, Carlos, can you learn this piece for me? Or
it's like, what would you rather have somebody who is really well versed in the language of Rachmaninoff and has played a lot of the Rachmaninoff piano concertos and their Etude Tableau and their preludes, or somebody who doesn't play that much Rachmaninoff but plays with a lot of people?
Yeah.
Preferably, you'd want both.
Exactly.
Right, but if you had to choose one,
Well,
then that's why, and that's why I think that a collaborative piano, it's a lot of just learning on the job.
And as a pianist, you've maintained kind of a solo career as well, right? Because I just saw that you played the Gershwin, the Rhapsody in Blue.
Yeah, I wouldn't call it a career. I mean, that like, I like to keep up my solo piano stuff, you know. I gave a solo recital here and there. Every once in a while, play a concerto if I'm asked to, but it's less than 1% of my income. It's like, for me, that's a part of my life that I have to hold on to because I don't want to lose my chops.
Your chops.
You know, I don't want to lose what it means to be a pianist. And also, it's also to dispel the word accompanist. It's like, as an identity, it's a horrible thing to be. It's like Mr. Lowenthal said, it's just admitting that you're bad at everything else.
Wow.
I always say, like, with a Brahms solo piece, they call you a pianist. In a Brahms trio, they call you a pianist. In a Brahms quartet and quintet, they call you a pianist. But suddenly in a Brahms duo, they call you an accompanist.
Makes no sense.
It makes no sense. It's like if there are two people playing in a Brahms duo, they call you an accompanist. But if you add a third person or subtract a person, suddenly you're a pianist again.
Exactly.
So it's like one person and three people, you're a pianist, but two people, you're an accompanist. Makes no sense.
Musical math. You know, musicians make math in really weird ways.
Yeah.
And if you had your way, would you prefer to play with other people, or would you just like to play by yourself?
I would never want to just do one thing. You know,
okay.
like,
That's a good answer.
And
like
even today in my life, like, I never thought I would join a vocal world, but now I'm.
Yes, I wanted to touch on that.
Yeah, and now I'm part of the opera program at Rutgers.
You've been simping a lot of arias for a few months now, and it's very exciting because I have a lot of friends who do opera as well. How has that been for you? And the music is a lot easier, right?
Yes, definitely.
Quote, unquote.
And equally beautiful,
Yes.
which I have only just come to realize. Like now that I've involved in the opera and vocal world, I'm like, holy shit, where has this music been all my life? I mean, this is really some of the most beautiful music ever written. And that was sort of a pandemic thing.
Uh-huh.
And during the lockdown, which was hard for all of us,
Yes.
you know, we're all on unemployment and nobody had concerts and anything. And once the pandemic was over or whatever,
Yeah.
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Once people started going back to work,
Yes.
I got hired at Rutgers, and I was also a pandemic hire at NYU. And my supervisor at Rutgers, an amazing woman named Karina Brook, she texted me, and this is my first time working. It was like this is August of 2021, right? So this is just people are just kind of they're starting to go back to work.
Yeah.
And she asked me, she said, what's your experience with opera? And I said, nothing, zero. And she said, great, you're hired.
Awesome. Yeah.
And since then, I've been working for the opera department almost exclusively at Rutgers. But so now it's great that I still work with all my instrumentalists. I do some solo piano playing. I do a lot of chamber music, you know, with trios, quartets, quintets, and I work for an opera department, and it's wonderful. Because I wouldn't have it any other way. I think I want to be able to do all of these things for the rest of my life.
Just a bunch of things, right?
Just a bunch of things. I even play in orchestras as an orchestral piano. I'm a sub for the Ocean City Pops Orchestra. I do a lot of their summer concerts.
Pops Orchestra, that sounds fun.
Yeah, I do it. I do their like John Williams concerts and stuff like
so
that.
Cool.
Yeah. No, I just if anything needs a pianist, then I want.
Yeah.
That's what I want to be a part of. And that's why I think the word accompanist is so. It's not just that it's bad; it's that it's incorrect. It's just factually incorrect.
But what about the vocal world? Like in the vocal world, they are accompanists or not?
I mean, who knows? You know, it's like an accompanist as a situation or as an identity. Because if it's as an identity, that makes no sense. It means that you don't do anything else with your life.
Absolutely.
Right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Just like a musician.
Yeah.
Like if you're a musician or an artist, you just assume that you don't know anything about business or making money and all that.
Yeah, I used to talk about this with Rohan at Juilliard. And we would say, I cannot think of a single musical situation where the word pianist is not better than the word accompanist.
Oh,
I mean, can you think of like any musical situation where the word pianist isn't just better? Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like, oh, that guy's playing...
More correct.
Yeah.
More correct, yeah.
Like, let's say you hear somebody say, oh, that guy's playing Sigurnarvæsen with his accompanist, right? Or you could just say that guy's playing Sigurnarvæsen with a pianist. Yeah. I mean, it's not that difficult. I always used to say, like, what do you call somebody that plays the cello? We call them the cellist. What do you call somebody that plays a violin? You call them a violinist. What do you call somebody that plays the piano? And all of a sudden, everybody's like, oh, shit, what do we call them? Oh, shit, what do we call them? And I'm always like, it's really simple. Mm-hmm. They're just pianists.
Just pianists.
It's just like a violinist is just a violinist. You know, someone who plays the violin is a violinist. Somebody who plays the piano is a pianist. It's so simple, but the simplicity of it is so difficult for people. Mm-hmm. But then they're like, but then how do we know if they're a collaborative pianist or a solo pianist? And I'm like, well, how do you know if somebody's a collaborative violinist or a solo violinist? Is there even such thing? I mean, the whole thing makes no sense, especially since historically the term accompanist always used to refer to string players. You know,
I love that. It's like viola being the original thing, and like a violin is a small violin, and a violoncello is a big viola.
Of course. I think that didn't change until the era of the mega superstars like Jascha Heifetz, and you know, they came and all of a sudden pianists started taking a back seat, and opera singers too. Yeah, definitely. Oops. Yeah. So I just think the word pianist is always better. And like I told you before, it even affects how we're getting paid.
Totally.
So.
Yeah. And going to something about the vocal world, I think it's even a little worse for them because some of them don't even ever perform live. Like people who
vocal coaches. Yeah,
vocal coaches don't even perform live. That's gonna be tough.
Yeah, I think so. there are a lot of people out there in the vocal world who are trying to make me a coach,
How are you with languages?
which is sweet. And I don't know any other languages, so I don't think that being a coach is in my future.
I see. But I mean, maybe it could happen.
Yeah.
And the vocal world is very, very different because for instrumentalists, they're usually really high-end musicians.
Yeah.
Sometimes for singers, some of them aren't.
And that is
That's-
something I had to get used to, like, really quickly, because
They can't count. Is that
yes,
true?
exactly. And I this is nothing against my singers who I love, but just the voice matures later, right?
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of these people, a lot of singers don't start singing. They don't know how to read music until they're 17 or 18.
That's going to be a big change.
It's a big change.
From
And-
Vladimir to a guy who just has a good voice.
Exactly. And famously Pavarotti didn't read music
He
that
was a
well.
baker. He was a baker until he was 40 or something.
Yeah, and it's
According to
something
what I read.
it's something also that I've had to have a little bit of empathy for. I think,
Empathy.
yeah, because we're all coming from different backgrounds.
Absolutely.
And it's sort of cruel, in my opinion,
Mm-hmm.
that we take singers who like just learned how to read music at 17 or 18 or whatever background they're coming from. We take them and we shove them in the same school, in the same situation as people like Zlatomir, who have been doing this since they were like 4 years old,
Exactly,
right?
exactly.
So in my opinion, that's cruel. It's a cruel thing to do already.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like we cannot look at everybody from the same
Exactly.
perspective. Everybody is coming from different backgrounds.
Absolutely.
Everybody's coming from different experiences, and that's something that especially in my career, because within the same day, I think I'm working with a piano quintet in the morning that involves my friends that I've known for however long, and then 2 hours later, I'm working with a 14-year-old kid whose mother is there, and we're just going from ground zero.
Yeah.
And then 2 hours later, I'm working for an opera department at Rutgers, and I'm working with singers, a lot of who just learned how to read music recently, and a lot of whom are over 30 years old and married with kids.
Yeah.
And then
It's a wonderful
nighttime
life.
comes, and I come home and I am having rehearsal with people like Zlatomir or whatever. Like, it's just this vast range of different musicians from different backgrounds, and
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And who would you advise to become a collaborative pianist? Who do you think has it in them? What makes a good collaborative pianist?
That's a really good question. I've thought about that question for a long time. I think it has a very complex and multifaceted answer. And listen, the reality of it is that when I'm throwing these percentages out of my ass, but 90% of pianists who are in conservatories right now, they have hopes and dreams of becoming the next Martha Argerich or whatever, right? But 99.99% of them, that's not going to happen for them.
Exactly.
We all know that. And I do believe that if someone's heart is really in music, that there's a place in the music world for everyone.
That's great.
I think I don't know what job that it's going to entail, but I believe that one can really make a living in the classical music world if your heart is really in it. If your
you
heart
really
is really in the music. And that's what I think about for collaborative pianists. If there are pianists out there in solo piano programs who want to go into collaborative piano, that's great. And if there are people that don't, but they, they need a job, that's great too. I mean, to be honest, I got thrown into this profession because I was broke. I went where the money was, right?
Exactly. And there's a lot of money
I'm
to be
like,
made
no
that.
one's begging me to play concertos and recitals across the United States, right? So I had to make a living. And the way that I made a living, the fastest and the quickest way to make a living when I first got out of school was collaborative piano. And I was like, well, this is how I'm going to pay my rent, And then a lot of things take over. Suddenly you're
Life
playing...
happens.
Yeah, and suddenly you're playing music, collaborative music, that's just the most beautiful music in the world. And you think, I could really do that. I mean, and then you think, I'm getting paid money to play the most beautiful music in the world
That's
with a
really
lot of
beautiful.
really great
Yeah.
people. That's a living.
That's really
you
great.
know?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what I would tell pianists is, look, the concept of a solo pianist doesn't even really exist anymore. I mean, there is no such thing as a pianist out there who doesn't play any collaborative work at all.
Exactly.
Right? That just doesn't exist. Everybody plays collaborative piano. But pianists who are resistant to playing collaborative piano for whatever reason, a lot of that is sometimes ego or whatever. Pianists who are resistant to playing collaborative piano, that's what troubles me a little bit.
Okay.
Because it essentially means that you're not really playing the piano for the music itself.
Yeah.
You know, you're in it for something else, like
For the ego.
yeah, for ego or
100%
whatever it is. But if it really is if your heart is in the music, you'll follow where the music goes. You know, you'll follow where your heart takes you, because there's so much beautiful music out there. If that's what's driving you, then you'll make a living. You'll make money.
And the money as well. The money
Yes,
also
I think
helps.
the money follows if your heart is in the... It sounds so cheesy when I say it. Like, now that it's coming out of my mouth, I'm like, wow, it sounds so fucking cheesy. But I really believe that it's
Life
true.
is a little cheesy. you
Yeah,
know?
yeah. I really believe that it's true, that if your heart... If that's what drives you...
Playing good music.
Yes.
By great
yes,
composers.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Playing great music by great composers
With good friends.
or whatever. Yeah. If that's what drives you, you will have a career. You
Yeah.
will make a living. So me and my colleagues, we used to have a joke. Actually, the pandemic has changed this a lot. But we would say there are three things that we take into account before accepting a gig. There's three things.
Yes.
There's good music,
Yes.
good musicians, and good money. And then we used to say, if you have two out of those three things, you say yes to the gig.
That's awesome.
If you have three out of those three things, I mean, then your life is made, right? That's what you do. If you have one out of those three things, you might be becoming into a little bit of a musical prostitute, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
let's go through them. I mean, if you have a gig with good musicians and good music, but it has shitty money,
Yeah.
I'll still say yes to that gig.
Okay.
You know?
Okay.
Because I'm with good musicians and I'm playing good music, I'm like, yeah, it could be worse, right?
Yes.
If you have good musicians and good money, but it's shitty music, I still say yes to that gig too,
Yeah.
right? It's like, okay, well, you know,
You
we're
can
in
have
this
fun
together.
with it, even if it's bad.
Yeah. If it's good money and good music, but shitty musicians, I'll still say yes to it. It's a little disheartening because
That's the
you know,
worst. Yeah. Yeah.
So you get my point. It's a combination of things. But if you have bad music, bad musicians, but good money, I used to say you shouldn't take that gig. But ever since the pandemic, I might have changed my mind.
That's really good. That's awesome. And you know,
Yeah.
just before we end,
Yeah.
you have a lot of other interests.
Yeah.
Like you're a really good cook.
Oh yeah, that was a pandemic project. We all
Oh,
had
really?
our pandemic
I
project.
thought
Oh,
you-
before 2020, I could barely fry an egg.
Oh wow! So man, and I'm actually taking a lot of advices on where to eat in New York.
Yeah.
Through your Facebook page. So
Oh,
why don't you
yeah.
tell me some really good places to get? You know,
Some of my favorite places.
Yeah, my
Oh,
friend
yeah.
and I, Jose Manuel here in the cameras, we went to that roast duck place.
Oh, you went there?
Yeah, to
Oh my
Union Square.
gosh.
It's so good.
It's so good.
Very, very big line.
Did you wait in line?
Yeah, I waited in line. I got the roast duck. It was really good.
Oh, excellent.
So what other places do you recommend?
Actually, one of my favorite places is just a few blocks from here. It's called Cafe China. It's a Sichuan
Cafe
China.
China.
Yeah,
All right.
it sounds like it has a title of a place that wouldn't be good, but it's incredible.
Cafe China #1, Cowboy Bebop or something like that, right?
Yeah, that's one of my favorite places. It's just down the street. It's like a 5-minute walk from here.
From Times Square. We're in Times Square.
Yeah, yeah.
What
Yeah.
else?
One of my other favorite Sichuan joints is the Mountain House, which
The
is
Mountain House.
in the East Village.
All
The
right, all right.
Sichuan Mountain House. It's also one of my favorites. And then one of my favorite street food, I guess it's a lot of people's now favorite, is the Adele's Halal Cart.
Adele's
right there
Halal
on,
Cart,
on
really?
49th and 5th.
That's fun. That's
also a long line. It's like that line can be 2 hours long.
Yeah.
But it's just the greatest. It's like for $8 or something, you know, it's just
Yeah.
the greatest halal food. you
Well, living in New York is great for the food and the music and
Yeah.
everything, right? And you also like gamble? Like play cards?
Yes,
okay.
I do. That's right. Yeah.
And you say that whenever you make some big bucks there, you always spend it on
I always
food or
spend
something.
it immediately.
That's
I
awesome.
think that's the way to go. I play a lot of poker. I also do. I sports gamble on boxing because it's legal now.
Oh, really?
It's only been legal for the past couple of years, but I bet a lot on boxing. And then whenever I win, I would just spend it immediately on something reckless,
On something reckless.
like a expensive restaurant.
you
or something.
afford it. Yeah. Now you can afford it and you deserve it.
Because if you put it in your bank account, it'll just go towards your electricity bill somewhere.
That's not fun.
That's not.
That's not what we gamble. Oh, that's pretty
Yeah,
nice.
exactly.
And you recently got married.
I did just 2 weeks ago. In fact.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Musician as well.
Yes, she's a violist.
And
Yeah.
You met her at.
Yeah, we met at a festival, and she's actually now a doctorate student at Rutgers, where I work.
Oh, great.
Yeah, so
That's convenient.
she's finishing up her doctorate there.
Oh, well,
Yeah.
well, congratulations a
Thank
lot
you.
of that.
Thank you.
It's been very fun talking to you, and
You too.
I really hope to continue seeing your Facebook posts. I really like it when they're really angry, but also kind of funny. I think that you're very hard, but you're just. Just like
I
God.
hope so. I think that just before we end, a lot of people like yourself who read my Facebook posts or whatever, I come across as very angry.
No,
And I have to like remind people, especially in the music world and people who know me, that actually my reputation in the music world is of being one of the easiest people to work with.
that's good.
You know, and I'm rarely actually like how I sound on Facebook.
Yeah,
I think
you sound- yeah.
I'm not angry in real life. You know,
No, but you're
Very-
fun. You're funny angry.
Yeah.
You're not like
I get-
bitter and pissed off. You're just you're a lot of firelights.
yeah.
How you say it? Whatever. You're very colorful
Yes.
in your language and, how you express yourself.
Yeah.
And we all really love it for you.
Thank you.
So well, thank you very much for coming to talk with us.
Thank you. Thanks for
talk
having
with us.
me.
And
Yeah.
is there anything that you want to invite the good people of YouTube, Facebook, or anything? Do you have a concert coming up? Anything?
Oh no! I mean, I'm getting ready to leave for Summer Music Festival, so I'm going to be gone all summer. So,
Amazing.
Yeah.
Well, I think this is gonna come out sometime in June or August anyway. So
Yeah.
yeah. So
Great.
please hire Carlos Avila if you are in New York, and be prepared for a very hefty fee. But still, he's worth it, and he's great. And never call him accompanist,
Thank you very much.
and never say, "Can you accompany? Will you accompany me?" That was
Yeah.
a good one. So thank you very much, Carlos.
Thanks
very
a
nice
lot.
talking to you.
Yeah.
See
You
around.
too.